Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, you've heard us and many others say better prompts make better results, but maybe our best practices are actually hurting our results. Ethan Mollick and others have put out recent data suggesting being polite and other hacks might have you missing critical blind spots. So that's what we're discussing on today's show. This is the Daily AI Show. Today is May 1st, 2025, and I am joined today by Beth, Jyunmi, Andy, and I'm Brian. And yeah, this is a fun one to get into because, what have we been saying since day one, which is watch what you're doing with your prompting. And maybe now with what both with Ethan Mollick has put out, and we'll get into that in a second, as well as from Anthropic has some great, obviously, articles on this as well as others. Even Ethan Mollick in his Substack that he wrote today that went out this morning, he quotes Sam Altman from 2023 talking about this idea. And what it really tells me is, as we dig into this, memory is going to have a huge impact on prompting and how they work. But obviously, also with everything we were talking about yesterday with the 4.0 rollback and everything else that went into that, and how it, what was the term Jimmy got syncophatic, fantic, zero some, then that has effects too. So I don't know, Andy. Usually when we get into sort of these technical things, I have a tendency to want to throw to you. Do you feel like you can kind of get us started today?
Yeah, so let's go back to, how this whole arena where you're interacting with a large language model is not like retrieving information from a database. It's not deterministic that way. It has a lot of variability, and I think that's what Ethan Mollick's experiment shows very plainly. So to make it simple, each time you put the very same prompt into an LLM, it's unlikely that you're gonna get exactly the same stream of tokens back. In part, that's because there's variability or randomness already built into the way that the model is generating the response tokens through inference. So there's functions that are built into the mathematics of that that are not going to be perfectly reliable. Now you can reduce the variability by setting temperature to 0, and for this experiment that Ethan Mollick did, where, by the way, they were running hundreds of instances of a very complex, challenging mathematical kind of prompt, through the model, and then changing just simple parts of the prompt that's the user prompt in there, uh, modifying whether they're being polite or commanding, or whether they're expressing a specific format for the result or not. So they made those changes, but what the final conclusion is that those changes in a large series of runs don't really have materially different results because of the random variations of the responses that are a function of the underlying variability of the model itself. So where we all were kind of learning along the way that there were ways to prompt a model with certain verbal cues built into your prompt, up to and including saying, like in a highly emotional rant, that you were going to lose your job if the model
Right.
didn't give you the right answer. We thought that these kinds of things were actually triggering responses in the model that could be predictable, that could, like without fail, making such a sort of a histrionic a demand of the model would actually improve its result every single time. That turns out not to be the case from this analysis that Ethan Mollick's team did at Wharton, right? At the University of Pennsylvania at Wharton School, which is where Ethan Mollick is a professor and a leading, a thought leader in the world of AI. So the bottom line is, if you're thinking that you can make small adjustments to your prompt that will reliably result in an improvement, this is challenging that notion. Making changes to your prompt will make changes in the results, clearly, because that's part of game, this cat and mouse game that you're playing
Right.
with LLM in order to get this thing back. But it's not clear that there's any one thing that you can do that's going to reliably produce a positive outcome as a result of your making that change.
Which kind of like leans back on Dario Amodi's, we talked about on the news yesterday. It was one of the news stories I brought up about, this idea of needing this MRI machine to peer into the black box and get a better understanding of the models, because this is showing through, you know, doing a lot of experimentation that, perhaps what we thought made a difference or made an impact. And I don't want to go as far to say, Andy, that it doesn't, because I've certainly had earlier than now, I would say 2023 versus 2025. I certainly had things where people would share a prompt and it did make a difference on my machine. I've also seen the opposite where I go, it seems to work for you, but it doesn't work for me. And then as command prompt came out. Was it command prompt? But it was the first set of system instructions that came out and that were appending apparently to it. It was the precursor to memory. And then we had the memory, and now we have interchat memory, or at least that's the idea of it, although it never works for me, so I have it off. But the idea that we have this memory involved in it, to me, we're just going down a line, and this is what Ethan Mollick talks about, not in the report, but his blog that literally came out. Well, I read it this morning at like 6 a.m. Was just talking about this effective personality, and how what we really have are a lot of models that are, as we saw with the rollback for 4.0, really trying to do their best to meet my needs, me personally, Brian. And memory is only going to make that better for me, but worse for holistic prompt concepts that should work across the board. Because Beth, I don't know. We were teaching classes 2 years ago for AI, and I think back to then, and if those classes were happening now, I feel like you and I wouldn't get through any lessons, because we would have to preface everything with also may not work for you because you have memory on your system, and your system just may not process, with its new personality, may not process this prompt the same way that it does that you and I might have been showing on the screen. I don't know.
So I think it's a really interesting question, and I've had a bunch of conversations with ChatGPT about the ways that I tend to approach prompting and collaboration with AI in the context of this episode. And the first piece for me is that it's not about accuracy, right? Accuracy isn't defined as you got this math problem right. Shock to everyone. I am not, prompting for PhD level math on a regular basis where that is, super relevant. What I want, what is right for me, is determined by me, because what I'm using AI for is a collaborator, a thought partner, right? And
Mhm.
my process is reflective. I say stuff, I say, reflect back to me what you've heard and make an observation, ask a question, make a recommendation, like whatever is appropriate in that context. And at that point, I'm the source of truth. And getting it wrong actually isn't so much of a problem as an indication like, "Oh, so we're not aligned yet." Right? So let me explain more. Again, we were talking in our Be About It show. One of the things that I do is use a job identifier. So when I have a conversation that I want to have and it's going to be specific, like I need a framework of knowledge for my thought partner. I give it the goal. I give that custom GPT a goal, and then it tells me what the words would be that would frame that particular context. And I mean, essentially, it doesn't use all these words, but it's essentially like, yeah, no, they went to school for these 2 things. They have a deep interest in these other sort of random niche kind of ideas to get a holistic
Mhm.
AI persona that I can talk to. And I think that's interesting in the context, like how in what way does get it right matter, and in what way does it not? And how often are we using How often are y'all using Jyunmi, a process in which right answers are like the thing that you're looking for?
Well, for me, I deal with a lot of processes, right? Like I said, so what we've initially started out with is, can LLMs or generative AI fill certain roles in those processes, right? Automation isn't a thing that was only invented when AI came out. It was a huge part of processes in multiple levels, ETLs and all those kinds of things, um, where what you wanted was programmatic steps that you could reliably recreate. Right? LLMs and generative AI was able to fill a space to make it easier or lower the bar of entry to build those processes. Otherwise, you needed far more knowledge, skills, and experience to understand how all of those components worked with each other. Right. And then you saw things like Zapier, right, come out, which is it's supposed to be a no code kind of solution where these are the components of things that you're already using. This is how it interacts and whatnot. But automation can get more and more nitty gritty beyond that. But what LLMs offered us was, hey, when it comes to the content or the creation part of the information cycle for this process, here's something that can do it. Here's something that's fairly reliable. Or is it or our interaction with creating the process? Hey, LLM, I want to be able to do this. How do you do it? And that fixed that part of it. And now we're seeing all of these agentic features come out. And that's one of the things that, made N8N so popular is because they had this agent module in there where the LLM starts making the decision. You give it a general, shopping lists like, do these things. Okay, cool. Here's all the tools you can use. And now it becomes more agentic, which is all about lowering the difficulty or detail level that you need to put in to those automations. So from the process side, this kind of evolution that we want to see, because eventually, what for me anyways, what I wanted to see from an AI is to be able to do all the things that I'm not necessarily a specialist in,
Mhm.
right? It's like, hey, I don't need someone constantly to do that, to give me all of the information that I need and be the expert in this, but I do kind of need these three things. Can you handle that? Yes. Okay, perfect. Now I don't need the person who knows the 1,000 things. I just need the three things, and then it evolves from there and there, further on from that. So that's kind of the way that I'm looking at this evolution and how I'm approaching each of these things. So it's one of the things that made the paper from Mollick so interesting was, okay, are you going to give me some? Is this paper going to give me the insights that I need to increase that uh, productivity or accuracy or anything along those lines? And what we're drawing from is, like what you said, is not necessarily true. Though when I saw the graph, what it told me was, oh, okay, so the 100% accuracy bar is the biggest on the formatted side. So that's good. It's still only 30%, but it's good.
I think, I was listening to what you were saying, Beth, and you're saying like, oh, accuracy isn't necessarily what I'm after. I mean, I have, for my role, that's not the case. I need accuracy, and I need it to be accurate repetitively. And that is a challenge of any model. I can't tell you how many times I've had, you know, rough sessions sitting at this desk where some prompt that was giving reliable results overnight just simply doesn't, because OpenAI in most cases, now I use a lot of Sonar from Perplexity. I also use some Claude and stuff like that. So I've definitely expanded the models I'm working with. I'd like to start working with Llama, to be honest with you. So, now that I'm expanding into other models, there's even more variables out there and more ways for these models to have small tweaks to them that get released. And then you see things like the rollback with 4.0, where that can drastically affect the outputs, obviously, of prompts that I had set in place. For me, I still say, and I kind of do the manual version of this, that the future solution for all of this is mixture of experts. And I mean mixture of experts in the sense that I've theorized on this before on the show, that I believe the future is some sort of blockchain like solution. I'm not saying blockchain in particular, but a solution, and latency and cost will have to come down probably for this, where when you are looking for those verified results, the success rate of those results being right every single time. In my case, I'll tell you exactly what I was working on right before the show. I was working to get a prompt to get clear about sub industry. That's a very, very big deal in what I do. If I'm trying to send out personalized emails and stuff to people through sales and help my clients do that, doing their persona in industry does not get it done. I need to know Andy's industry, and I need to know his sub industry, and I need to know Andy's title. And then I have a chance of saying something that feels personalized to Andy. We know this, we've done this. This is not like an up for discussion thing. It just has to happen. So getting an LLM to reliably come back with the right sub industry for Andy, for FitAid, okay, it's a beverage business, but it's different. It's a lifestyle beverage business. Or maybe, Andy, you might say, well, hold on a second. Really, the sub industry is X because it has to do with fitness and health and things like that, right?
Yep.
So that's really important.
Specifically, to your example, it's the functional beverage sub-industry.
There you go. Functional beverage beverage. And so that's important. And my point is that is a fact that I need to know in order to talk to Andy more personalized. And I'm asking LLMs to do it. So the way I work around that now is through very careful prompting and a ton of evaluation. And I test this model and I test that model, and this the same process. And I tweak this and I tweak that. I will tell you, yesterday, there's 3 different ways to get a sub industry. There's like industry standards for the US global. You know, the one that works the best. Going and finding what the industry is on the LinkedIn company page is actually a model. And then having it infer the sub industry from a bunch of other variables, such as roles, descriptions, job titles within that industry, is actually the most accurate. That's the side. My point to all of this was to come back and say, I feel like the future of this is that mixture of experts, that blockchain. What I mean by blockchain is some sort of register that is validating answers. And then those answers come back together. And what we only see at the end of that is the outcome of that process. So things have to get substantially faster. If I was to have to wait for every answer from ChatGPT to first go through 4 different models of validation, citations, relook at the citations like a deep research would, and then come back with the answers, I might be waiting for every response to be whatever. But if I'm calling for math or something like that, I would actually prefer for that longer latency in order to have a higher probability of having the right answer. And the last thing I'll say on this before I throw it back to you guys is Carl recommended me listening to a podcast yesterday, which I did while I was sort of, I don't know, vibe coding is right, but I was working on Project Bruno last night. We don't talk about it. And it was the podcast is Unsupervised Learning. And episode 63, Khan Academy founder, CEO on Salman Khan on classrooms in 20 years, rolling out so on and so forth, right? So it's an interview with, and I just kind of love what Khan Academy and Khanmigo did. I think they were so ahead of the game. Turns out they actually had really early access to GPT-4. So maybe they weren't as ahead as we thought. They had it months. He says it. They had it months before the general public did. So it is what it is. But Khan Academy or Khanmigo blew me away when I first used it. He said something really interesting. I think goes to this. His son was using something for math through Khanmigo, and it was like, he said it was at the level order math. His son is in high school that is now approaching his level of math. He no longer has, it's like sort of my daughter is there with doing like pre-calc and things like that. I don't think I ever took pre-calc. So it's all kind of new to me, right? And so he said, oh, did Khanmigo give you the right answer? And he said, well, it was close. I had to work through it a second time. And he said, oh, is that a problem? He goes, well, Dad, you're not right all the time either. And so I think that goes back to your point, Beth, about having this relationship Rachel Woods actually talked about this on LinkedIn yesterday, about the idea that the faster you get comfortable with that AI might not be right, the better off your relationship actually gets with it as a coworker, because it's understood.
Right, right. And to go back to the blockchain or chaining prompts, the technique that I use more is chaining prompts. Um, it it makes me wonder if we are needing to go back to very minimal interaction levels that are chained based together, and that is actually part of the course that we taught as well. So in your example, finding the right, I'm gonna butcher it, finding the right industry, sub-industry within the context, um, that information comes back as a single part of the chain, as a single link in the chain, right?
Yes.
And then in programming, that would then get set as a variable, right?
Yes.
So we set that. And then we don't need that to be memory. We don't need that to be anything else. It's set as context that isn't going to change within the AI structure because it's not held in AI memory. It's held in like this equals this, right?
Yep.
Um,
It's exactly how I set it up in NNA. It's funny you say that. I had a prompt that just the way the solution was to have a prompt that solves for sub industry, set it as a JSON variable, pull it into all the future ones as a variable. It's exactly what you just said.
right. And AI is great at helping you build that. Maybe not in N8N, but in more in more simplistic prompting for like code-based prompting or prompting as if it's code. When you set those variables, those become shorthand for the AI. And I think that's close to where we're going, but that takes a different kind of thinking. I'm really curious, Andy, do you do like Andy, what are you thinking in terms of this?
Well, what I wanted to add is that what we put into the message dialog box as a prompt is not the entirety of what the model is receiving when you click enter, right? So there's a system prompt that's you know guiding the model overall that was done by the people who trained the model. That's getting added to the prompt because there's not a general knowledge at the time of inference that the model owns and uses as the background. That has to be fed to the model each time an individual generates a response through the model. So the system prompt is the one that tells, and we've seen these published, by the way, which was very interesting. Somebody managed to get the system prompts for multiple models out there and publish them. And so, the system prompt starts out with, "You are Chat GPT." Okay. That's the one that the model developer adds. And there's a lot of instruction and context in that system prompt. There's another category of prompt that's in there hidden from your view, which is called the developer prompt. Now, the developer prompt is somewhat different from the system prompt, but it's also fed into the process of inference. And what the ultimate combination is the system prompt, the developer prompt, the user prompt, what you typed in the box, and then on top of that, now they're starting to add memory as context. So the model might spend some tokens first going back through your chat history, for example, and adding that to this big package of tokens that's called the compiled prompt. So the compiled prompt is what actually gets fed into the model. And it's the response to the compiled prompt that comes back to you. Now, the reason I went through all of that is to say, making small changes to your little piece of the package, doesn't have all that much weight compared to the totality of the compiled prompt. And in some cases, some of the instructions or directions that are in the system prompt that are in there for safety will override requests that you make in your user prompt. So your stuff gets knocked out. And many of you have probably had the experience of having the response from the model be, "I'm sorry, I can't help you with that."
Right.
Right? Which is a result of whatever the compiled prompt was, had some instructions that basically overrode your instructions to the
Right.
model. And jailbreaking a model has has come to be known as some tricks that you could put into your user prompt to circumvent those restrictions that are there and get it to respond to your instructions sort of in violation of other higher order system or developer prompts that are there to govern the behavior of the model. But all of those things, just the complexity of what a compiled prompt is, which isn't particularly visible to you as a user, those things, they kind of they adjust the overall weight of what it is that you're requesting. So one of the things that we know is that the model is going to have variable responses. It's a function of all of those components of the compiled prompt. And not only that, but the randomness that's deliberately infused into the process of inference through the temperature setting, which is typically not 0, it's at 0.7 or something like that as the default. And when you're working with ChatGPT, you don't get control over that. It's already set, and there's a level of variability or randomness. And so every time you put your prompt in, you're gonna get something slightly different back.
Right. And the part of what is interesting and frustrating about this is that the system prompts, I don't know if any of the models publish their system prompts, right? This was
So they don't want it to be out there
right.
because that then gives you an opportunity, or it gives hackers an opportunity to understand how to build around that system prompt. But early on, there was published, I think, to GitHub or elsewhere, there was a full set of all the system prompts of the models that were available at the time. And do you guys remember that happening? And I remember looking through them and being quite fascinated by the simplicity of the
Right.
natural language instructions that are a part of the system prompt. Like, "Oh, is that all I need to do, to direct this model? I don't really have to go through all these complex instructions. I can just kinda give it this general guidance." Anyway, who knows what the system prompts look like today? I don't think you have access to them.
So Pliny the Liberator, at Elder Plinius, Plinius, I did put the link in the chat, um, is my source for system prompts, and they, I don't does Liberator have a gender? Um I don't have, I don't know when like, the schedule in which they do it, but they regularly release these, and in fact, more recent, posts have been on, Quen's new model, right? Um,
And this is for entertainment purposes only.
That's right.
we do not endorse or, refute I don't know, GP. So is it important? I mean, it seems important. Right?
Yeah.
That
100%.
there be some transparency in the system prompt.
Uh, I yes, I agree. Back to the black box and the MRI part of it, back to how do you get better results out of it? But I still go back and say, sure, we're talking about this, but I think we're right on the cusp of bigger problems here, which is the personality side of it, which is the personalized version. And again, more to what Ethan Mollick talked about in his recent blog post that came out from Substack. And I'll just tell you because I feel like I've said it 6 times now. What did he call it? Personality and persuasion. Learning from the sycophants. That's what it's called, and it came out this morning on May 1st. So you can go look that up. I believe you can read that in the app regardless on Substack, regardless of whether you sign up for his blog or not. By the way, just slight thing, when you go to paid version of it, I do love it for Ethan Mollick. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this because I was curious. I was like, well, what do you get outside of the blog if you paid? And it basically says maybe something, maybe not. I like just the 0 tiers to it. It's just like maybe someday, but probably not. You might get something. So literally just like support him and his work if you feel obligated to do so. But like, don't expect anything back in return. Anyway, total side note. My point was personality and persuasion. we have higher memory. Memory is only going to get more complex. Andy, you just laid out beautifully everything that's going into us simply saying the sky is blue. We're asking what color the sky is or what color my shirt is if it's looking at an image or something like that. And there's just so much more to it. But how soon before what color is Brian's shirt starts to have wider and wider variety or more and more variety if all four of us ask the same question based on this screenshot. We just feed this screenshot and we say to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. And then not only that, depending on which tool we are, and then depending on how tuned in that tool, that LLM is to our personality, and then maybe it's a open source sitting on our computer as a light model with 7 billion parameters. Now we're starting to think like, well, yes, we would agree. We would, because it's a predictive engine, we're going to get different answers. We all agree on that. But we might start seeing a wide variety of those answers that starts to move away from what everybody else is seeing, a la social media and algorithms. So my Facebook algorithm and Beth's and Jyunmi's and Andy's are we're all going to be slightly different. Same thing with TikTok. It's just trying to feed me more of what it hopes that I want. What is to say that OpenAI isn't um fully incentivized to keep my eyeballs in their system. And if they figure out a way through the algorithm to ensure that it says exactly the way, not sycophantic, but like subtly, subtly,
Subtly.
subtly.
There's a beat
There's always
there
the word.
that doesn't need to be there.
Every single show, there's some word that I can't say live on a show that I don't have a problem with off the camera. It's amazing. Um, that they are incentivized to do in a way that I can't perceive anymore. Not like this last rollback where everybody was saying the same thing. Way, way, way more nuanced than that. But I'm like, I don't know. I can't really say why, but I just love using Claude.
Well, that's the whole goal, is to do that, for to c claim market, customers, and attention. I mean, that's what marketing essentially is. "Hey, look at my thing. I have something to sell you." Now, if I can do it more subtly and easier and less, because people have a natural defensive mechanism. It's like, "Oh, you're trying to sell me something," you know? But the smoother that transfer goes, the more you're gonna see the result that you're looking for. This is when they started experimenting with, like, subliminal things, when they started to do A/B testing. I mean, A/B testing is just a version of this, but, a more raw version of this. "Oh, let's try 1,000 different versions. Which is the version that gets slightly better return?" "That one. Okay, we'll do this."
But even
Right?
that's not personalized, right? We know where that's going.
Right,
Is
e
it thousand better
exactly, and they need to.
you?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and so
Jyunmi.
for sure, and that, I mean, there is going to be a strong chance of that is the way that people are going to hear and understand the world, is that it has been hyper personalized to them, which then starts talking about being in your own echo chamber, and then is, separation from reality, and all those kinds of things. So I'm glad you brought it up, because that's a great thing to be aware of, and is part of the larger AI literacy that people really need to know. It's like, no, I don't, and I think a lot of people just not aware still of to what degree this technology will impact their lives. So,
Right.
yeah, you have to be aware of it so you can pay attention to it and call it out when it's like, "Oh, that's too far," line in the sand, that kind of thing.
And look, we've talked many times about how character.ai is one of the top rated, most visited AI sites consistently. Andy, you've called it out several times. It's been on the list that we've looked at. So they're like kind of leading the way, right? Like their whole business model is that people are going to want to talk to these AIs and, have a conversation with maybe their favorite, anime character, or maybe it's somebody in history and it's taking, it's an Abraham Lincoln type thing where it's more historical context, or maybe it's something totally made up by that person. And they want to have conversations with it. Like, to me, those are the companies that are probably leading the way on personalization, dwell time, these kind of things. And look, I guess this all comes back to me as we're sort of talking about this. So what now? Like we see these reports, we see what people are talking about. Oh, okay, things that we thought made a difference or being polite perhaps doesn't. Okay, that's kind of what the reports are saying, among other things. So not that this is a new rules for once a year we do our new rules for prompting, but here we are on May 1st. What do you guys think? What would be your suggestion? Obviously, Beth, you use it differently than I think a lot of people, which I love. Jimmy, you're using it more for process. I don't just use it for sales, but during the day I do, and at night I'm building other things. And I had a great. I just posted about it. Like the last 40 or 50 hours of working on this project has all really been working side by side with Claude. Totally different user experience and phenomenal. Much closer to what you're talking about, Beth. Andy, I don't know if you said particularly, but I know you've certainly talked about using it as for memory and helping you log and those kind of things and put thoughts in there and whatever. So I don't know. What now is the question. What now? Where do people go? How should people approach prompting given this research?
I have it's kind of a slightly off topic, but the very I think it's the second post under Ethan Mollick's thread there was um, using politeness is good for being human or something along
Right.
those lines, right?
Yes.
And so my takeaway beyond seeing the graphs itself, but my takeaway is uh, I'm still in the camp of let's use please and thank you. Sure, AI overlords down the line. Why not? I'm a sci-fi guy. But also to help us practice etiquette and protocol when dealing with other people. Right? If we're going to be spending so much more time with AI as part of our daily lives, this is a tool that we're going to use every day for different aspects of our lives. Let's keep that humanity in the process so that we don't become lax in our own skills when we do interact with other people.
Right. The two things that makes me think of, that I know we've talked about on the show before is I'm in the interaction too, right? Like,
Mhm.
I find ordering exhausting, right? You must do this because all of the like,
Mm.
I would not choose that as a roommate or a coworker. I'm sorry. Like, no. And my saying please sort of keeps me human, right? I'm not trying to like game the system. But the other piece of this is I think they're anecdotal things. I don't know that it was an actual study, but once Google and the lady wiretaps were more ubiquitous, teachers started to notice a difference in the way that young students asked questions of the teacher. It was much more, "Teacher, give me blah, 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 blah," because that's the framing that you use with the lady wiretaps who tell you what time it is and set timers for you. And I think that's a subtext of this conversation as well. So yeah. Andy, you look like you were actually gonna answer Brian's question.
Well, I want to say one of the reasons that this subject came up is that Sam Altman from OpenAI said that the addition of politeness, tokens into the stream is actually costing OpenAI millions of dollars in inference costs.
Right.
So there is like every single word that you put into your prompt does cost something for OpenAI or any other model processor to process through their models. And especially with the politeness words, what it does is it triggers a whole other aspect of its retrieval from representations in the deep neural network that have to do with how should this response be phrased given that this person is polite, right? And that could lead all the way up to, the when you're trying to close out the conversation with the LLM after getting the answers that you wanted, it's going to be really, really pleasant and generate even more tokens and more inference costs for OpenAI as it tries to close it out in a polite way. So I think that's what he means, is that it's actually costing us money, but it's a better user experience. So we're not going to
Right.
turn it off, right?
Yeah.
It's a better user experience, and it's more human-like, which is one of our objectives. So let's keep going with that, even though it costs us money. But if you become very practiced in exchange with a particular model, and you're working on something as Brian is, with his collaboration with Claude, at least I find that I think you would find that you'll start to strip it down to just the essentials. You're not getting, now we've been working with each other for a while. I'm not going to be saying please and thank you every time you do something, right? Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
but-
like, Andy, like, let's see, it's the first today, so in 12 days will be my 19th anniversary. My wife and I probably do not speak in the same way in year 1 or, being engaged as we were 19. We're still plenty polite to each other, but it changes, right? It gets distilled down into the things that that if I say it this way, I know I will elicit the answer I'm looking for from my wife, and she does the same thing to me, or my daughter would be the same way. Like, you in a house with people, you are Andy, like, you learn. And I think you're right. Like, the models at some point when you're having conversations, and it's pretty clear with Claude, I'll tell you from my standpoint, because the minute I go to a new chat, all of that is lost. We start all over again. Now what I have tended to do is say, hey, Claude, I'm going to need to move into a new prompt with a new chat window with you. Go ahead and tell me all the things that you might want to know as other Claude 2 from Claude 1. And that helps a little bridge the gap. But there's no doubt about it. I've gone from hundreds of thousands of tokens in a chat to, whatever the starting prompt is, right? And from there. And it definitely makes a difference, and you have to adjust the way that you respond. I also want to call out what really quick. Delma said something, and then Garrett said something right after. Delma said, "We already having people going up to counters, and instead of saying hello, I'd like to get whatever a coffee, they say give me a coffee without any greeting or niceties. That drives me bonkers." Gareth sort of responded and said, how you do anything is how you do everything," and I think that gets to the root of it. Is it probably does have a lot to do with how you were brought up. Manners, just how you're brought up in your household probably does dictate a lot about how you will interact with LLMs. And of course, that's through a keyboard. But now we're starting to speak to LLMs more. And, I just saw another update from Boston Dynamics this morning when I was reading the news. And, they're now going to be in Hyundai, different manufacturing and stuff like that. And so people are going to be in and around more and more humanoid looking robots, probably in industry first. I'm not saying in your house, not Rosie, but still people are going to be interacting with more and more of these AI enabled in life, robots, if you will. And it'll be really interesting. I did a joke or a comic about it in like maybe 2 newsletters ago. But the joke of it was a young couple goes over to a neighbor's house for dinner. They get invited over, and they're laughing at the table and stuff like that. And then it cuts to a scene of the older couple just berating the humanoid robot for forgetting the dessert. And then it cuts to outside, and the young couple says, "I didn't really like how mean they were to the robot. Let's not go back there for dinner." I mean, this is
Right.
what we're talking about.
And if Carl were here, he would talk about people's relationship with the robot dog that isn't even a dog, right? Like it's just called that because it looks vaguely dog-like, and much less dog-like than humanoid robots look human, right? It doesn't even have the full shape in that kind of context. One of the things that I think is that you're making me think about in terms of my own process in having that conversation is that in a human-based conversation, I would at some point say, "So what about you? What are you thinking about this?"
Mhm.
Because it would be incredibly rude to just say I want you to stay with me in this conversation for as long as I want. I want you to remember everything that I said, and I want you to have no intention outside of you want to be helpful to me. And periodically, I'm just gonna go again, right? Like, did not like that. Give me another response, right? Um, that I think is again really helpful for me as an individual and has different politeness or manners between, and that is less about whether I'm saying please or thank you, and more about the freedom I get in being able to have those conversations, um, and it being incredibly one-sided.
So as we sort of wrap up here, I don't know. Did we sort of answer the question I posed, which is, what now? Do you guys have any thoughts? I don't know. We don't have to be right. I mean, but any thoughts on how or anything you're gonna do to adjust? We never claim to be right. Um, we're just
I,
having conversations.
I think it's this is great information to inform how you're gonna apply things, right? This is just one more data point. Ah, okay, interesting, right?
Okay.
But I don't think it calls for, all right, let me reevaluate everything that I'm doing,
Yeah, it's very
right?
hard.
Because
So
I think with anything with generative AI right now, it's a matter of your applied circumstance, right? What are you doing? Does this inform you to try something a little different? Does this give you an idea, oh, maybe I should go down this path instead of this path? That's the main takeaway I see from this report, or this study. Um, but again, it's just like, all of those benchmarks and other things like that. That doesn't really mean much for most people, except for the numbers are higher, right? Which implies better. Um, it really just what really matters is how you are applying it to your use of generative AI or AI.
I'll add that my natural tendency is to, use long compound sentences and, carry on way too long. And I think that given that there's quite a bit of variability and in the sequencing of the ideas and how you present them and so on, stripping your prompts down to something a lot more spare than a long, exposition about what you're thinking and what you want, down almost to the bullet point model. Uh, I think that there's some merit to that. And then always, to, kind of honor Beth and her always on advice, which is ask the model as the final part of your prompt to ask you as the prompter questions to clarify if it needs any further information. It may not. And so my my way of proceeding from this point forward would be I'm going to try to temper my, rambling exposition in prompts and instead try to format it in a very clear and simple way in almost an outline or bullet point format. And that starts to approximate a structured prompt as opposed to a just a general dialogue with the model. And there's some virtue in structured prompt because it does apply a level of expectation in the model around formatting. And one of the takeaways from the analysis that we started the show about is that one of the things that did it's sort of elicit more accurate responses was the request for a specific format.
well, I think we'll leave it there. I think that's a good ending on this particular topic. Don't forget, tomorrow we have our 2 week recap show, so it's very possible that we will follow up on a little more on this particular topic. But it also gives us the opportunity to talk about all the different topics that we've discussed over the last 2 weeks, of which there's always a bunch. So it's a great show to just reflect back, look back at the topics, but of course, brand new conversations on and not just rehashing the same things we already said, just bring a new light to it, or perhaps things that people have already put in the community, which is a good indicator that you should join our community. You can go to the dailyishowcommunity.com and you'll see the sign up for Slack. That's where the community is. And we have people in there all the time, like Jen and Greg and Delma and Gareth and others and Jude, who are in there, and they're leaving us comments, so letting us know what they think about the show, ideas for future shows, but also follow-up conversations on these particular topics. So we'll take all of that and we'll have a great conversation tomorrow. But if you want to be more part of it, you can either join us live. We're here every single weekday at 10 a.m. And then you can join in all the wonderful people who are on YouTube and having the live conversation. But even if you can't catch us live, and we certainly understand the majority of you cannot, wherever or whenever you're listening to this, you can always join us back in the community, which enables you to be part of the conversation. And we absolutely read everything. We absolutely take your consideration seriously. So the Daily AI Show community. .com if you want to do that. And of course, if you want even more information coming out once a week, you can join the newsletter by just going to the dailyaishow.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter there. It goes out every Sunday morning. So that's it for today, guys. Great conversation as always. Thank you everybody in the comments and bringing your insights and your thoughts to this as well. We love it. And we will be back tomorrow for our biweekly recap. But until then, see ya.
Aloha.